In this lesson, we're going to be learning about the clone stamp. This is a tool in Photoshop that is quite powerful. We're going to be learning how to use it and how to use it effectively. Lately, in the newer versions of Photoshop, so this Photoshop version we're going to be using is Photoshop 2023. In newer versions, there is a new tool that's called generative AI, but we want to be able to learn how to use this tool maybe in conjunction with that. We won't be talking about generative AI in this, but we will be looking at the kind of manual controls. We'll readdress that later in a subsequent video, so stay tuned for that. But for this one, we're going to just be working on how to manually make changes to an image. Now, in the last lesson, we learned how to make a sphere and a bowling ball using some of the controls, but Photoshop's real power obviously lays in making edits to an image. That's what it's used for. It's used for lots of things, layout and typesetting, lots of different things, but it's kind of powerhouse is editing images, obviously. So what we're going to be doing today is learning how to make some changes to images. Okay, we're going to be looking at a couple. And so what I want to demonstrate is just how this tool works. So let's go grab, start off with this guy here. And we're just going to look at what this tool does. Okay, so here's an image, and I'm just going to take the clone stamp tool, which is here. Okay, and the first time you use it, you need to set a point which is going to be kind of your target. Okay, if you just click right away, it's going to give you an error, and it's going to say that you haven't kind of defined a source point. Okay, and so to do that, you need to hold Option on your keyboard, and we're going to say, where do I want to take from? Because what this tool does is takes from one area and repaints to another area. So if I say click here in the middle of this image, and I start drawing over here, well, let me set my opacity back up. Okay, and I start drawing over here, it redraws, okay, the image from where I was taking from to where I'm drawing. Okay, if I click that again, click here, and I start drawing over here, it does the same thing. Okay, so I'm gonna hit undo. And so we can use that to edit an image. So let's say, I want to modify my horizon. Okay, I can decide that I want this mountain from here over to this side, and I can just paint that in. And depending on how careful I am, I can make that look realistic. One of the tools that one of the lessons I've done in the past is turning this dotted line, this double line into a dotted line. Okay, and to do something like that, you just go in and you would basically thinking about what would be here if there wasn't yellow paint, there would be more of this kind of gray color. And so you would use the rubber stamp tool to basically remove. So I'm going to make a smaller brush here, and you would basically go and like hide. I would do a much better job on this, but you would hide what's there in that yellow painted area. Okay, so a couple of things before we start practicing this. If you're going to be using this tool, let's just first look at the way the brush works. So it works similar to a brush tool or a paintbrush tool, right? We've got some sliders, we've got size and hardness on a brush tool. We have similar controls on the clone stamp tool. Okay, we click on this guy here, and we have our size and we have hardness. Size obviously refers to how large or small your brush is, and hardness refers to the edges. So you've got kind of a hard-edged brush or a soft edge brush. So let's just take a look at what that means. I'm going to go to a 100% hardness brush. I'm going to Option click here and start drawing. And what you can see is I'm getting hard edges around the size of where my brush was. Okay, I'm getting hard edges there. By contrast, if I change that to a soft edge brush, and I'll go all the way down to a 0%, okay, which is completely soft edge brush, I do the same thing. I'm going to start from here and go drawing. And you can see that now I've got kind of a feathered or a soft edge. I'm not getting those hard edges that I had here. It blends into the side. Now we can use a combination of these depending on what we want to do. We can also do things like select our brushes and be more specific. We'll get to that in a minute. First, let's talk about what's happening. So as I make this any selection, whether I'm using a brush, okay, if I take a brush, I'm using a keyboard shortcut, which you should learn. Okay, I can go up to here and drag this, but there's a keyboard shortcut on your keyboard, the two square brackets. There's a small square bracket, which will make, sorry, a left square bracket, which will make your brush smaller, and a right square bracket, which will make it bigger. Okay, so that's a shortcut to change the brush size, and that works with whatever tool you're working with. Okay, so what's happening when I draw? I'm taking this from here and I'm drawing over here, but notice that I only have one layer. So what's happening here is it is drawing over the pixels that existed here. We're going to learn later about how to edit that and change that. But for now, we're gonna to sort of challenge ourselves to work in one specific layer, okay? So a couple things to notice or to think about. As we do this, we're gonna be using various sizes of brushes, and we're gonna be thinking about how this changes over time. If I'm getting rid of some of this yellow line here to make it look as if it were disappearing into the background, into the distance, those dashed lines would get closer and closer, right? The width of this road is quite, almost the full width of this image here, but back here, obviously, as it gets further away, it disappears into the distance. So we're going to be doing the same kind of thing with our the dashed lines we're going to be creating. All right, so let's take a look at how to do that. I'm going to actually first zoom in, so I'm going to hit Z on my keyboard or the magnifying glass. And while you're doing that, I can drag left and right to zoom in or out. You can also click to zoom in, or you can use your keyboard shortcuts. Command minus, okay, Command plus, or Command 1 will show you 100%, Command 0 will fit to your screen, okay? And so what we're going to do here is we're just going to zoom in, and I'm going to kind of get rid of this section here. So I'm going to go over to my clone stamp tool. I'm going to bring my brush right down, and for now I'm going to use a fairly hard edged brush. Okay, maybe not quite 100%, but something like this. And I'm going to kind of take from this area right here, and I'm going to paint right into this area right here. I'm going to get right up to the edge of where that yellow would end. And to get in here, I'm going to use either a smaller brush like that, okay, and then I'll go over here, a little bit of a bigger brush, and you may find more success with bigger or smaller brushes depending on how you work with the tool, and that looks okay to me. Now, what I might do is, if you notice the way that this image looks, it's kind of wavy here, where in reality, the photo has got what are pixels. We talked about pixels in the last lesson, and how those pixels are not exactly straight, okay? And that's just kind of the nature of both the image and what's on this road. I'm going to go to the hand tool here to move a little higher up here, which you can also do using the space button. So if I don't want to change my tool, say I've got any tool selected, the brush tool, the move tool, whatever tool I'm using, if you hold space on your keyboard, it'll shortcut to the hand tool, which helps you navigate when you're zoomed in like this, right? So I'm zoomed in fairly close. I hold space bar and I can move around. All right, so this is looking a little straight to me. What I might do here is take my clone stamp tool and maybe use sort of some of these elements here to just kind of make that a little bit less perfect, okay? And so that'll help add a little bit of realism. Same thing with here. If you look at what's happening on the edge here, this is quite, there's a bit of kind of blur, I suppose, between where that yellow starts and where the yellow is kind of really solid and where we get the road. Whereas here, we've got only really 1 pixel difference. So I might do the same thing here, right? I'm just going to go in here, maybe just around there. I'm holding Option to get my target point. Okay, and I'm just going to put in just a little bit of kind of waver here, and maybe something like that. And maybe I'll take a little bit from here. Okay, I'm going to go back up to 100%, to fill my screen, Command 0, and that actually looks pretty good now. Okay, I'm going to zoom in and do the same thing. Now I've got to pay attention to how close or far I want the next dash to be. So I'm going to kind of be looking around here, and I'm looking at like these cracks here to kind of gauge my space. So I'm going to zoom in and kind of go, all right, I want it to start kind of really at this point here and end at that point. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to my stamp tool like this and just kind of rough it in like that. I'm going to zoom out, Command 0. That looks okay. I might go a little bit further into the distance here. Okay, back to the rubber stamp tool or clone stamp tool. Sorry, it used to be called rubber stamp tool, and I'm sticking with the old name. Okay, so and then I'm going to go in here and just sort of rough that up a little bit. Same thing in here. I might just take a little bit from here and just make it a little bit uneven. And just adding a little bit of kind of variance here. And I'll do the same thing, a little bit of a bigger brush in here. And that's looking, oops, Command 0. That's looking pretty good. Okay, and I would do this all the way to the back, and you should as well, just to practice this skill. It's a pretty straightforward tool to use, but that'll get you started. All right, once you've done that, once you've got your road looking realistic all the way into the background, the next thing we're going to do is look at how we can make a kind of a little bit more control, or take a little more control with this software, or with this tool. So I'm going to go and grab an image. Let's take this guy right here. Okay, C star, open that up. All right, what I'm going to do now is I want to take this and duplicate this C star maybe 2 times into the background here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I could do the same thing where I take this and I'm going to go to my rubber stamp tool. I'm going to make my brush bigger, and similar to what I did before, I'm going to, well, sorry, I'm going here to my soft edge brush. 300 sounds good. Okay, and I'm going to hold Option, click on my C star, and start drawing into the background here. Now that looks massive because it, well, first of all, it looks obviously quite duplicated, but also looks massive because as things go further into the distance, they should be smaller if they're the same size. So we need to make a change to that. But I mentioned a minute ago that as we do this, it obliterates those pixels in the background. It's writing over the pixels in the background because we've only got one layer. I can't bring back what was under there. Okay, I can undo it. I can go to my history palette here and I can go back a step like this. Okay, but say we did a number of steps in kind of sequence, we wouldn't be able to go back far enough to maybe get that back. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to modify how we're using this tool. Now we're going to create layers. Layers are, the way that I like to explain layers is, if you think about this machine, okay, overhead projector, it uses these clear sheets, okay, and layers are kind of like that. Layers are just going to be almost like we've got an image here, and then over top of that will be a number of clear sheets on top of that, okay? And so if I click here, I'm actually going to just very quickly change the way you can see these panel options by making this larger so that you can see a little better what's here. I'm going to just drag this up like that. Okay, so what I'm going to first do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. There's a couple ways to do that. I could right click. I could right click and say duplicate layer. I could drag this layer down to the little plus sign here. It duplicates it, or I think the keyboard shortcut is Command J, and that also duplicates it. So what you'll notice here is I'm going to go to my move tool and I'm going to move layer 1 out of the way. And what you'll see is this guy is in the background. Now, if you can see it here, there are, I'm not sure if you'll see it in the video, but there are little gray and white boxes here. And if I turn this layer off, you'll see that's duplicated here. What that means is there's nothing here. To show transparency or to show something that's blank or not there, Photoshop uses these little gray and white boxes, okay? And so the reason I can see through from this to what's in the background is because there's nothing here on this layer, okay? And that's why when I turn this off, we can see back to what would be nothing, okay? I'm gonna turn that back on. I'm gonna put this guy back over here. Okay, and now we can't see through because nothing is opaque. There are no gray or white boxes here. Okay, and for now, I'm going to delete that layer. If I create a new layer, we'll get the same thing because there's nothing on this layer. We haven't added anything yet. We've just got these gray and white boxes. If I turn this off, there's nothing here yet. It's just like one of those transparencies I mentioned. Okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to draw from this layer to this layer. Now, previously, what we were doing with the clone stamp tool was using the tool on one layer. And if we look here on this drop down, we've got a couple options. We were using what was called current layer. And so if I'm drawing on this layer, it'll draw right onto this layer. But what we're going to do is we're going to change this to current and below, and we're going to work on this layer. Okay. And what that means is I can draw on this layer from this layer. So I'm going to, again, hold Option. I'm going to click here and start drawing. Okay. And I'm just going to rough that in there. And now you see, as I turn this off, you can see we've got this guy here, right, who is on his own layer separate from this. And the original, the original sand that was back here, the original pixels are still there. They're not being changed in any way because we've got this on a separate layer. I can take my move tool and move around, and you can see that it's not affecting that background layer in any way. Okay, all right. The nice thing about that is I can make edits to this. So let's say I went, a little too far with my clone stamp and I got kind of more than I wanted and I wanted to edit that. I can either take my erase tool. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, Z on my keyboard. I'm going to go to the erase tool, which is E on my keyboard. Use that keyboard shortcut, the square bracket. Okay, and make my brush a bit bigger. I'm going to make sure that I've got a soft edge brush, so I'm going to go down to 100%. I'm just going to like fade this out with a little bit of eraser tool. I'm going to get rid of this little section here because that looks quite duplicated. If you see it's here and here, it looks a little bit obvious that it's been repeated. So let's fix that. I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to take that eraser tool. I'm just going to soften kind of that edge there, clean that up. And I might actually do the same thing with the top of this because the sand there looks quite similar. So I might zoom in here and just sort of clean that up. I can do that again with the stamp tool. I'm just going to go from this layer, a small brush. I'm going to pick up, oh, I don't know, maybe I'm going to try and find some pixels that look similar to that. And maybe I'm going to go, maybe here. I'll just put that in the way and maybe some of this here, and that'll do. Okay, that looks different enough. Okay, and I no longer look like it's exactly the same. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this smaller. Now, the way to make this smaller, there's a couple ways. You can click on this show transform controls, which I actually don't like. I don't like having that on. I find it kind of distracting because it just turns on the controls for whatever is on your layer. So you can do that, but if you want to change it, then you can click and drag this. But I'm going to hit escape and I'm going to show you an alternate way, which is my preferred way. I'm going to go to edit, and then I'm going to go to transform. There's transform, you can go transform scale, or you can just go Command T, which is the shortcut for free transform. Okay, so if I hit Command T, it'll give me these controls and I can just drag that. Okay, now by default, for older versions of Photoshop, when you did this, it would actually end up squishing. It would squish your source image, okay, depending on where you move your mouse. But what happens now is Command T, it locks the proportions by default, so it won't change the way that looks, which is better. All right, when I'm done with that, there are a couple ways to apply this transformation. I can hit the checkbox here, okay, the check mark. I can double click in this area, or I can hit enter on my keyboard. Right, that's still a separate layer, so I can still pick this up and move it wherever I want. And if I want to, I can make another duplicate and put it further back here just by duplicating this layer. Okay, there's now 2 of these. And I'm going to move one back here, Command T, make that a little smaller, then double click in this area and position it where I want it. That's too far. All right, something like that. All right, and that, that can take a bit of work. We can continue with editing that and getting it just right. Maybe I want to get rid of some of these shadows, but you get the idea. All right, the last one we're going to do is going to be this mushroom. And in this one, we're going to do a little bit more planning. The reason I say that is because this is quite easy. There's not much thinking that goes into this. Again, not much thinking that goes into this. Quite easy to do. But with this one, we've got more of a challenge. And the challenge is the background. What we're going to try and do with this is move this mushroom so that it's over here and make it so that there's nothing in this spot. So again, the first thing I want to do is I want to have a layer to work on. So I'm going to create a new layer. Okay, I'm going to go and grab my clone stamp tool. I want to make sure that I'm using my current and below, okay, so that I can clone from here onto this layer and then make some edits. So I'm going to hold Option on my keyboard. I'm going to click at this sort of edge of the mushroom here. And I'm just going to maybe a slightly bigger brush and I draw on my mushroom. So that's going to go here. And I'm purposely not doing a very good job. You can see I'm getting like extra pixel here. Okay, so I'm going to repair that in a second. Let's go back here and continue. Okay, and I'm going to go down to here and have that just sort of fade into that overgrowth there. All right, so we've done a half decent job there. I'm going to zoom in, and like I said before, I can use the erase tool just to tighten this up. And I'm going to have a hard-ish brush, maybe 90%. Okay, and I'm going to get in just around here, maybe a smaller brush than that. Now you can really spend some time getting this exactly right. I'll let you work on that. I'm going to kind of rough it in. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect for what I'm doing, but you should spend some time doing this properly, okay, and get kind of good at this skill. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit softer than this. Okay, and I'm just going to go in here. And as I say, I'm not going to do a perfect job. I'm going to leave this to you, but you should definitely get in there and do that well. And make it so that, because if you handed in work that I can see is poorly photoshopped, you're not going to get full marks. You should definitely be going a lot slower than I am here. You should be zooming in really close and being kind of careful and cautious. And I'm definitely not doing that here. Spacebar. Okay, that'll do. And I'm going to just soften up these edges here, because otherwise we're going to see those edges and it's going to look messy. Okay, good enough. Command 0 full size. All right, turn that back on. All right, that actually looks terrible. Okay, so you're gonna have to go back and fix all that. That's quite a mess, right? So whether you want to bring back some of what was here to blend that out, and maybe that's easier. I'm gonna go here, go to that stamp tool, and I'm just gonna blend this in just a little with a softer brush because it looked really terrible like that. I do the same thing here and just bring back. So what I've done there is brought back some of what was erased from here to sort of blend it into those background colors because it was looking quite bad. All right, so the reason I wanted to do this, and actually that looks still quite terrible. So this is going to take a bit of work. Nonetheless, let's go back and now look at this. And this is really the part that I wanted to talk about. To get rid of this, I need to be a bit thoughtful about what's going to be back behind here. I need to make it so that when this is gone, what should be there, which is this tree here, this needs to exist behind here, which means I have to be a little bit thoughtful about how I use this rubber stamp tool, okay, or the clone stamp tool. I want the tree to continue. So I'm going to go up here I'm actually going to start a new layer just to give me some control. Okay, so we'll call this mushroom. And we're going to call this tree and background. All right, so I'm going to make sure I'm using the current and below, hold Option, select my source, and I'm going to just draw in this tree. Now, I'm going to make a little mistake here. I'm going to continue drawing, and notice what happens when I get, you can see there's like a crosshair just above. It's where I'm taking my source from. And watch what happens when I get down and the cursor or the target gets close to where that mushroom is. You can see I'm now drawing what used to be here, even though I haven't, I've gotten rid of it. I haven't let go of my mouse button. So it's drawing what used to be here because I did it in one brush stroke. So what I should do instead is do that in multiple brush strokes. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to reselect my source. I'm going to fill this in here. And as I get, wait, let me try that again. Okay, right there. I'm going to fill this in here. And then once I'm happy with that, rather than get that crosshair too close to the mushroom, I'm going to let go of my mouse and then reselect the next bit. So I'm going to click up here and I'm going to continue drawing in these elements here. I might make a little bit of a bigger brush. Excuse me. Okay, and I'm going to do this kind of in bits. And the reason for that is I don't want it to look identical to what is anywhere else on the screen. I don't want to be able to see things like this shape here. This is kind of an obvious shape. I don't want that repeated here or it'll look like it's been photoshopped. So I've got to be a little bit careful about that. Okay, by the way, the keyboard shortcut for this is S. I keep coming over to the toolbar, but I should be using the keyboard shortcut. So if I'm using V for my move tool or E for my erase tool, I should be using S for my clone stamp. Okay, so I'm going to just take a little bit from maybe here. Get rid of that. I'll take a little bit from here and this away. And that's actually looking all right now. Okay. And maybe I'm going to get rid of this here because that looks a little bit funky. So again, S Option. I'm just going to go over that like that. The last thing you can do is you can also take a little bit of a percentage, so an opacity percentage. So if I want to, I can draw over this. I'm going to create a new layer. I can draw over this to make it just a little bit different. If I was worried that this looked really similar to some other part, I can change it by adding, some more detail at a lower opacity. So here's what I'll do. I'll go to that rubber stamp tool. I'm going to select these kind of darker trees here. I click here, and I'm going to just draw this in over here. But notice how that's 100%. What I can do instead is change this opacity down to, let's say, 25%. Okay, and then I'm going to go again from here. I'm just going to draw this in here, and it just creates that lighter kind of 25% opacity. Okay, and you can see it's just this. It's even quite hard to see. That's what I'm talking about right there. And all I've done is just added that in over top, which just creates a little bit of variation, okay, to make it a little more realistic. I might now go in and just maybe one more layer above all of this and just clean up what's happening here because that's a bit messy. So on my top layer, I'm just call this moss, and I'm going to go to my clone stamp. I'm going to pick up from maybe here. I'm just going to go over top of that. I'll add 100%. I want that back to 100. Okay, and I'm gotta be careful about that edge. See that I went and I chose an edge here, so I'm getting to the end of where those pixels are. I'm gonna be kind of aware of what I'm doing with the tools. Maybe to here. That looks okay. All right, so that's kind of the tool in a nutshell. You're going to practice with that. Your deliverable, what you need to work on is you're going to complete all three of these, okay? The road, the sea star, and the mushroom, okay? And they all demonstrate different skills. So make sure that you are comfortable with all of them. And you're gonna, when you're done, save all of your work. You need to save a PSD, which is your Photoshop document, and you need to export a JPEG for your website, okay? To do that, I'm gonna go File, and File, Save As. Okay, the drop down here is going to be, we want Photoshop, which is going to save a PSD. Okay, we want a PSD, and that is our authoring file. That's going to keep all of our layers, etc. Okay, so I'm going to go to my downloads, I'm going to save that as mushroom. Okay, and when I'm done with that one, when I've saved that PSD, it's going to go saved and put in your named folder. You're also going to upload that as a compressed file to your Brightspace portfolio. Finally, you're going to go File, Save Copy, and you're going to save a JPEG. Okay, by choosing the JPEG option from the drop down here, and you're going to put that also in your named folder. Okay, and name that. You don't need to put copy here. You can just say mushroom.jpg and save that as well. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, and you are able to practice with that skill. The slower, more carefully you do this, the better your results are going to be. So take your time, zoom in, get close to your work, and hopefully you'll be successful with this. Good luck.